Oh, happy day. Esther, Story 4. The principal truth against the greatest odds, the Most High God can be trusted to bring deliverance to his people. With all eyes on Esther, and hundreds of Jews fasting and praying for Esther to find favor in the eyes of the king, the time was drawing near to reveal Haman, the trusted friend to the king, as the traitor, an enemy, the foe. The very survival of her people was at stake. Esther had no way of knowing how this day would end. But God did. God knew. The thing God wants us to remember is fear stumbles us while faith stretches us. The king and Haman walked into the banquet hall to join Queen Esther on the second day of her banquet. Oh, they could smell the delicious food and see the most beautiful presentation of all the best foods and fruits and vegetables. And of course, the best of the king's wine. Esther began to serve King Xerxes and his honored guest Haman. Again, the king looked at Queen Esther and asked her, "What is your petition? What is it? I shall grant it. Up to half of my kingdom is yours." Esther said, "If I have found favor in your sight, and if it pleases you, let my life be given to me and save my people. We have been sold. We are to be destroyed, slain. We will be annihilated. If we had been sold merely as slaves, I would have kept my peace. But our affliction does not compare to your loss, my king." The king's face turned red with anger. He became enraged. He said, "Who is he? Where is the one who would dare do this?" Esther pointed her finger at the king's trusted friend, Haman, saying, "It is Haman. He is your enemy. He is wicked." Shocked, the king rose slowly from the table, and he walked out into the beautiful garden to think. He was silent with the news of this betrayal. Overwhelmed by disappointment, he had no words to express his pain. Meanwhile, Haman, reeling with the shock and the fear of being exposed as a traitor, and the wicked man that he was, stayed behind, and with quick thinking, he fell to his knees, and he began to plead and beg Queen Esther to forgive him and have mercy on him. In a dramatic display of false humanity, Haman throws himself on Esther's feet, crying and pleading and begging. Just at that moment, the king, somewhat composed, entered the room and sees Haman clawing and crying and begging and pleading to the queen to forgive him. The very sight of this enraged the king. He exploded, and sarcastically he asked Haman, "Would you even try to attack my wife right here in my home?" A servant of the king who had witnessed this entire episode reminded the king the debt of gratitude that he owed to Mordecai the Jew, and he pointed out the gallows just right outside the window, the very gallows Haman ordered built to hang Mordecai the Jew, the very gallows that would be the gallows that would bring the wicked Haman's life to a horrible end. Mordecai began to scream and to shake and to... In a split second, King Xerxes realized a way out of the terrible fix he had found himself in. He had a great idea. He would make Mordecai the new prime minister. He would order Haman hanged on the gallows, and he gave the house of Haman to his wife, Queen Esther. Esther and Mordecai came before the king. Esther explained to the king who Mordecai was to her. He was her beloved uncle, the man who had adopted her and cared for her all her life. Queen Esther put Mordecai over the house of Haman and sealed it with the signet ring of the king. Mordecai, being in charge of the house of Haman, was also in charge of the 10 wicked sons of Haman. They were just like their evil father. They were prideful, evil, selfish, full of hatred. The thing that God wants us to remember, that what God intends for evil, the thing that God wants us to remember is what man intends for evil, God uses for good. How would Mordecai and the king handle the deadly edict that had made law? A law of the Persians and the Medes cannot be changed by anyone, not even the king himself. What would they do? The day and the time of annihilation of the Jews was drawing near. The thought of it brought Esther to despair. She went to her husband, the powerful King Xerxes, and begged him, avert the evil edict Haman tricked you into writing. Do something. Please, if I have found favor in your sight, and if it seems right to you, write a letter to revoke this deadly edict. How can I endure to see the destruction of my people? The powerful King Xerxes recognized that he was utterly helpless. He could do nothing to help his wife and her people. He had done all he could do. He hanged the wicked Haman. He put Mordecai over the house of Haman, made him the new prime minister. But that would not change what was to come for the Jews. In an attempt to do something about this situation, the king told Mordecai, write something, anything, I will sign it. And without hesitation, Mordecai called for the king's secretary, and they began to write a new edict for every province, in every language, and in every script, and to the Jews in their own script and their own language. The thing that God wants us to remember is the Most High God is a God of love, protection, providence, justice, joy, and deliverance. Mordecai knew that he could not cancel out the old law to annihilate the Jews, but there was something he could do as the new prime minister of the entire kingdom. With full consent and authority of the king, with great haste, Mordecai issued a new edict, and putting into motion the means to have the edict throughout the kingdom very, very quickly. The edict was written in the name of King Xerxes and sealed with his signet ring, and went out with great speed by mounted courier on horseback. It read, the Jews in every city were to gather together and defend themselves and their families. The new law caused great joy and gladness amongst the people of Esther. Mordecai went out from the presence of the king in a royal robe of blue and white, with a golden crown on his head. The city city of Susa shouted and rejoiced. In every province and city where the edict was read, there was great gladness and joy among the Jews. They feasted and made holiday. Another remarkable result of the new law was many people of the country declared themselves Jews, for the fear of the Jews had fallen on them. Seeing Mordecai's wisdom and power, the people gave up their false gods and turned to the Most High God. They saw that there was something special and wonderful about the Most High God, saying, Look how the Most High God had delivered his people. And they became Jews too. The edict that the evil Haman had written called for the slaying of all Jews on the 13th day of the 4th. The edict that the evil Haman had written called for the slaying of all Jews on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. The Jews, by law, were not able to defend themselves, but now with this new law written by Mordecai, they were free to defend themselves and their families with the full consent and authority of King Xerxes, the most powerful man of the Persian Empire. Mordecai was great in the house of the king. His fame spread throughout the kingdom. Mordecai grew more powerful. The Jews destroyed all their enemies that hated them. The great day of conflict occurred throughout 120 provinces, but in the city of Susa, Esther requested the conflict be extended one more day to include the 14th, to double the victory in the city. She also requested the 10 sons of Haman be hanged in the gallows, and their dead bodies be left in public as an example to everyone, saying, "Do not touch the anointed ones." The Most High God had delivered his people. Whenever they fought, they defeated their enemies, but they laid no hand on plunder. They did not take advantage of the victory to gain riches. Mordecai recorded all these things and sent out letters to the Jews both near and far, telling them to keep the 14th and the 15th day of that same year as a holiday, the day the Lord turned their sorrow into gladness, their mourning into holiday. They should make a feast, sending choice portions to each other and gifts to the poor. They called these days Purim, the lot. Remembering all that they had been through, the Jews ordained these days without failing, keeping these days according to what had been written from generation to generation. The thing that God wants us to remember is there is no limit to what we can accomplish for the kingdom of the Most High God when we are faithful to the call. From Esther's day to present, God's people celebrate the feast of Purim, remembering the miraculous deliverance of his people, the heroism of Queen Esther. In every generation there are evildoers. There are Hamans, those who try to frustrate the faithful servants of the Most High God, and even appear to frustrate the plans and the purposes of the Most High God. No matter how desperate the situation, no matter how evil the intentions of man, the Most High God is always present and actively working for the good of his people. He is trustworthy to bring deliverance in the most desperate circumstances. He is faithful to bring victory and rejoicing to his children. The principal truth is, against the greatest odds, the Most High God can bring deliverance to his